As you well know, we are currently living in the midst of a pandemic. COVID-19 has ravaged the world, and we are now forced to spend the holidays away from our families and not travel so as to not inadvertently give them the disease, as over 1.5 million people in the world have died from it. In Meryl Singer's The Anthropology of Infectious Diseases, Singer poses several questions. One of those questions is, how does our conception of health change if we think of health as not an individual state, but instead as a reflection of human social relationships mediated by the environment? I decided to ask Facebook, my friends, my parents, and I dramatized their responses. They are: my mother, a social worker, said, health holds many layers, few of which are individual. Personal health involves getting regular checkups and making sure you're up to date with health screenings, such as a colonoscopy starting at age 50. Public health involves environmental risk factors that we encounter when bicycling in traffic, risk of accidents, outside activities, risk of skin cancer, eating fast food, risks of inflammation, and just plain living, risk of multiple types of cancer. There's a risk of catching a communicable disease like COVID. Many of these layers of health are affected by our social environments. My father, a professor, said, if we think of health in the manner that we need to focus on larger systemic issues like racism or class privilege, that mean that some categories of people enjoy better health than others. The lifespan of white people has always been longer than that for people of color, and the rich enjoy better health and live longer lives than the poor. They can afford healthier food like fruits and vegetables for just one reason out of many. A friend, Lori, who is a healthcare worker, said, the environment is an impactful component. Having policies and structures or programs that make it possible for individuals and those in our social relationship groups to make decisions and do any of these things. If you live in a food desert, have poor housing, no transportation, limited access to healthcare, recreation, etc., your view of health-related choices for yourself and those in your social circle are very limited. Take coordinated efforts on many levels to create healthier communities. My mentor, Krista, who is a lizard scientist, said, as individualists, Americans usually see health as a binary state, healthy or unhealthy, good or bad, that is brought about by an individual action. You can achieve health, the good state, by being good and living in a healthy way. But so much of health is determined by our environments and the way we interact with them. Some bad health outcomes are the result of individual actions, but I think we need to reconsider whether these individual actions are necessarily the result of individual choices that can be judged as poor decisions. In regards to COVID, we're seeing the cost of individual responsibility on the mediation of spread. This disease is spread by human interaction, but because we're all dependent on each other, we have to work together to stop the spread. However, the costs for COVID, like medical bills or keeping a job, are put on the individual. I'd say that living in a society means we're all interacting and responsible for one another. It's nobody's fault, really, so we should have publicly funded healthcare. We all affect each other's health and should all be responsible for each other's health. A friend, Jim, who is also a healthcare worker, said, health is so much more than the sum of the effects of proper circulation and oxygenation, the ability to extract food and to use that necessary in creative ways. Health may be thought of as all of that, plus the peace of mind that accompanies the state of being comfortable with one's place in their community or society. To be truly healthy, one cannot omit such social aspects. Humans are made to interact socially, much like herd animals, and are made to function best in a group of their own and within the framework of that particular pecking order. Isolate humans or isolate animals, and the result is the same: an unhappy individual whose physical health will eventually follow the patterns of their mental health. A friend my age, Kayla, said, this conception, as compared to physical health, is far more complex with the inability to pinpoint good or bad. Every culture and society vary on their definition of healthy relationships and environment. In my society, work is the determiner of health, and in my culture, it is instead of faith. We live in a constant battle of balance, what is required around us to maintain health, and also a way to balance what we need individually. I said, I think how we perceive health is vastly different if we perceive it as a reflection of human social relationships that is mediated by the environment rather than caused by it. And COVID is a perfect example of this. It is a failure of people to limit their social relationships for the sake of our health that is continuing to cause this pandemic. We could have greatly reduced the number of deaths in our country if the government had put not more thoughts, but more checks to its citizens. I also think it all comes back to capitalism, the idea that corporations can profit off of the healthcare industry of the government, which is of course run by corporations, essentially, um, actually takes care of its citizens by providing universal healthcare, which we obviously don't have. And that's these interviews.